Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the Gridiron Review. Coming up on this show, as always, we'll take a look at this week's high school slate. We'll take a look at the colleges and the pros. But first, the littlest of the Jimmies and Joes. This week, we had a new policy implemented with Anne Arundel County Recreation and Parks and the Anne Arundel Youth Football Association, which is basically equated to a zero-tolerance policy for bad behavior by parents. Now, did we have some maybe overzealous officials this week who reacted to anything that was said from a sideline? Maybe, but it's week one of the policy. The good news is it appears as if we got through week one with no parents being shown the door. That's always the most important thing, as we want them to stick around and watch their kids play during the course of the game. Couple of games just to feature right off the top here. Varsity U, great game this week between UQA and Brooklyn Park. The Lions win it by a score of 28-18. Now we all know, of course, that Gork and the Chargers, top two teams in that group, probably still going to come down to them. But this battle for number 3 in that league really taking shape very nicely in the Varsity U. Old Mills teams in the 80-pound group playing as we expected them to, playing dominant football, very physical group, very well-coached group. And I think what happens sometimes in this group, we have a team that's well-coached and well-prepared like that, and they're a little bit ahead of everybody else in that group. And the physicality, the good coaching, and things happen during the course of the game. And unfortunately, I think some people misconstrue what is a good team. And for a little bit of the violence that football is, they just happen to be really good at the game. And those two teams, of course, which were great in 70 last year, turned out to be very good in 80 this year. 12U Varsity U, or 12U number 1, Division 1. We had two really good games this week. Big one. Pair of unbeaten teams coming in, 3-0 Old Mill, 3-0 Crofton in this one, and the Cardinals able to pull it off, winning it by a score of 14-8 as they move to 4-0 now on the season. Another good game in that group. You'd never know that they were 1 and 2 teams coming in, but this is a really good league. This 12U league has been very good here so far in the early portion of the season, as Severn knocks off Andover in a thriller by a count of 19-13. When we come back, we'll take a look at our high school slate this week. The Big Four, well, 2 of them played each other. 1 of them turned out to be a big winner. The others turned out to be big winners as well. We'll talk about those games when we return on the Gridiron Review. Let's take a look at pro football for this week, and the Ravens with the big character showing in Cleveland. And again, not the Cleveland's greatest football team in the world, losing another quarterback. They're playing with their backup quarterback, and Josh McCown throwing it all over the yard against the Ravens. They're up 20-2. He gets hurt. Essentially, the game is over for them. And then at that point, you just knew at some point their defense was going to wear down, being on the field way too much in the second half without Cleveland's offense really being able to get anything going. The Ravens come from behind and win it by a score of 25-20. So everybody wearing purple and black is loving life. Keep in mind, your 2 wins are against the Bills and the Browns. They're probably 2 of the worst teams in the NFL right now. But you know what? They're wins, and that's all that matters. Obviously, the schedule is going to tighten up and get tougher from here for Baltimore. Joe Flacco and Mike Wallace really forging a nice relationship here. I think Wallace is clearly one of the bigger surprises in the National Football League this year. Probably on his last chance in the National Football League here after things did not go well for him signing the big deal down in Miami. But right now, he and Joe seem to be really gravitating toward each other. And then, of course, you've got the complement that is Steve Smith, who's going to move the chains, who's going to make the tough third down catches. They still can't run the ball. Justin Forsett, again, was a journeyman running back who did have a very good season, but they're not right now in a position to have big yardage in the ground. Wait till Kenneth Dixon comes back. That young man's going to be a starter here in the National Football League, I think, for a long time, as long as he can avoid the injury bug. Great touchdown score at Louisiana Tech. In college, only Keenan Reynolds of the Naval Academy scored more. Meanwhile, the Redskins took on their arch rival, the Dallas Cowboys, and don't look now. They're not Troy, Emmett, and Michael, but they are developing a poor man's version of the triplets with Dak, Dez, and Zeke, because right now those young guys for the Cowboys really look like they're putting together a nice core offensively to go with that great offensive line that they had. The Redskins defense for a second straight week just has no answers whatsoever. I mean, Deshaun Phillips can't cover anybody in the slot. Cole Beasley was burning him left and right all over the field. One time had him so spun around that Beasley went this way on an out route, Phillips went that way. So you can only imagine how wide open he was on the play on one of the first drives there for the Cowboys. And, Washington's offense, which was so good over the last 9 weeks of the season last year with Kirk Cousins as the quarterback, right now not making the same kind of plays they did a year ago. So efficient in the red zone last season, especially in that last 9-game run for Washington. This year, though, it's been anything but that. Interceptions, fumbles, field goals. Field goals really been the big thing. They're having to settle for field goals instead of touchdowns. Jordan Reed yesterday targeted just twice in the red zone. He was a big touchdown man a year ago. Yesterday, on the big play of the game where Barry Church picked up the interception. And this is all about, I'll give you an example in a minute of the Cowboys play design. Kirk Cousins took the snap, looked left, never looked anywhere else. So Barry Church, who was really shaded toward the other side of the field, providing double coverage as a safety against Jordan Reed, he starts to drift with Cousins' eyes because he just sees Cousins looking that way. Church moves over in that direction. Cousins finally throws the ball too late to Pierre Garçon, who had broken open, and Church steps right in, makes the interception for the Cowboys, thwarts what would have been likely a game-clinching drive for Washington. If they get a touchdown there, they're up 10 with about 5.5 to go. That game might be over at that point. Instead, Cowboys get the ball, go right down the field, and eventually get the go-ahead score provided by Alfred Morris. Ironically, he didn't do much during the game, but he did have the game-winning touchdown run from 4 yards away for the Cowboys to win the game by a score of 27-23. Washington at 0-2, losing their first two at home. Only one team in the history of the National Football League has done that and made the playoffs, so their season could be over already. We come back, we'll take a look at the guys that don't play for pay. Well, some of them do get scholarships, but they don't get paid. It's the colleges and the high school scene when we return on the Gridiron Review. Welcome back to the Gridiron Review, high school scene. And as Bill Wagner and I talked about last week, and Bill unable to be with us this week due to a really bad accident on Route 100 that kept him from getting to our location as he was trapped on the ramp there, but he did make the effort in the rain to try and get here. The same teams doing the same things here in Anne Arundel County. And what about the Annapolis Panthers? What a big win to pull away from Broadneck in the fourth quarter of that game to win it by a count of 40-19. A little bit closer than the score would indicate. Bruins suffered a really significant injury with Chris Watts getting hurt in the game, hurting his arm. And then Annapolis's defense and special teams really did the job in this game. They created the separation. And again, special teams at the high school level. Some teams take it very seriously. Some teams try to take it seriously, but just don't have the manpower without playing their starters in all three phases of the game. They eventually get worn down. And for Annapolis, you got to give them a lot of credit. Nick Goodmalloy, the head coach, actually handles the special teams unit for the Annapolis Panthers. Tyson Queen with a 70-yard kickoff return. And then Nyanje Spriggs with not one, but two interception returns for a touchdown. And the Panthers serving notice that they are indeed back and ready to contend with the top teams in Class 4A with the 40-19 victory in that one. Meanwhile, we've got Old Mill and Arundel coming up this week. You know what that game means. It means an awful lot. It's always good football between these two teams. And let me explain to you. You've got a guy like Chad McCormick who's been around the Old Mill program. Not only is the head coach, was an assistant before that. You got Chuck Markowitz, of course, been around for a long time. Continuity means something. So when you're constantly changing coaches like some programs do, then you get the disruptions in philosophy, guys having to re-implement their philosophy. And by that time, sometimes good athletes cycle out and graduate, and some teams never get to put it together. Arundel and Old Mill do that because they have championship expectations every year. Kids who enter their program are in the weight room in the off season, doing the conditioning work, and then when football practice starts, they're ready to go and get into football mode, and they don't have to waste time getting people into condition and getting up to football speed. That's what separates some of these teams when you got guys that are really dedicated, and of course it helps to have huge schools like both of them do as well. But Ryan Sedgwick continuing his good work, 309 yards on 21 of 25. That's highly accurate this week in their win, which of course was time shortened against Chesapeake by a score of 56-0. And the defense with Julian Neal and Ephraim Moore with interceptions, and they held the Cougars to 153 points. Now remember, first couple of games of the year, Arundel was giving up a lot of points. Chuck Markowitz and the team even said, hey, we're glad we're winning, but we've got some things we got to figure out. And to get that job done the way they did against Chesapeake this week, it's pretty impressive improvement from the Arundel defense to take care of their business there. Old Mill has always been a team that's prided themselves on defense. They get a shutout. They mauled South River this week, 38-0. Cyrus Gay continuing to have a great year running the football for them, 140 yards and 3 touchdowns in the contest. Blaze Fisher, quarterback, 10 of 17 with 120 yards, also ran for a 7-yard touchdown in that contest as well. And Old Mill and Arundel this week, you know what it means? It means we usually see it once. We may see it twice. Good news for the 4A teams, though. Even though Broadneck lost this week, they're the first of that Power 4, as I like to call them, to lose a game. The good news is North Point lost to Calvert this week by a score of 28-0. So that really opens the door a little bit for Anne Arundel County now to possibly get 4 teams because of the constant play against 4A teams helping them in the points. So especially if North Point loses somewhere else along the way, it really does open the door for even an 8-2 Anne Arundel County team to have a great shot to get 4 spots in here in the playoffs in the 4A East region. Meanwhile, other game that was really exciting, Southern beat Northeast 35-32, but as Bob Hoke wrote in the Capitol after the game, marred by a brief scuffle between the teams after the game. Young man from Southern grabbed a flag off the northeast side, really started something that should never have happened. And obviously Steve Erksleben, I know, will take the steps necessary to make sure that doesn't happen for his kids. And, Brian Blubich said that, hey, our kids didn't handle it very well either on the northeast side, but they clearly were, prompted in this case by what happened from the player from Southern. Zach Newland with another good game running the ball for the Bulldogs, 167 yards. Colin Phipps with a receiving touchdown, also had one rushing as well for Southern. And let's face it, baby steps here for the Bulldogs. They barely have a feeder program. That feeder program right now has 1 team. They've got a bunch of kids that are sprinkled around playing in Calvert County feeder programs and the Southern Maryland Youth Football Association. So they don't necessarily have the same advantage that Arundel does with the Gorks and Croftons of the world, and that Old Mill has with Old Mill's great feeder program that sends kids in there. So when you look at Southern having any kind of success going forward here, nice job by Steve Erksleben and company here in their first year trying to get the Bulldogs going forward, which is a really difficult task because it's the smallest school in Anne Arundel County. It's got the toughest schedule by far because of all the 4A schools on it. They will get some schedule relief in the future, but still having to play that heavy-duty schedule right now. 2 wins, 2-1 right now for the Bulldogs. They will certainly take it. Meade recovering nicely after their first loss to Annapolis in the opener. They've come back now with 2 wins as they knock off North County by a score of 27-24. Glen Burnie gets on the board for the first time this year, beating Severna Park by a score of 12-7 in that game. Spalding, no problems with St. Mary's Riken. Evan Fochtman with another big game passing and running for the Cavaliers. He threw for 3 touchdowns and also ran for 1. Julius Chestnut ran for 112 yards and 3 touchdowns in that game for Kyle Schmidt's Cavaliers in that contest. Sever knocked off St. Stephen's and St. Agnes. Ben Bedard went 12 for 20 for 163 yards for the Admirals in the victory. And St. Mary's gets on the board. They played a public school from Delaware. Delaware's smallest school in the entire state of Delaware, Delmar. And Delmar jumped out to a 6-0 lead in that game. But St. Mary's able to rally and get on the board for the first time this year, winning it by a score of 14-6. Donald Day running 10 times for 88 yards and a touchdown in that game for the Saints there. Now, on the college scene, Bill Wagner and I were in New Orleans this past weekend. No, Bill's not left behind in New Orleans, even though he probably would have liked to have stayed there. Navy outlasting Tulane by a score of 21-14. Will Worth runs for over 100 yards. Remember, he started the year as the backup, took over when Tago Smith got hurt, came up with a big drive after the Mids had missed an extra point. They were losing 14-13. He drove them down the field, did a lot of the running himself on the drive, threw a 2-point conversion pass to put them up by 7, and then they stopped Tulane cold on their last drive of the game. They win it. They're now 3-0 on the campaign. An off week this week, so 2 weeks to prepare for Service Academy rival Air Force coming up on October the 1st. Gauntlet of a stretch coming up for the Mids. They will play Air Force on the 1st, Houston, of course, one of the top teams in the country, on the 8th, and then 5 days later they're going to play that high-powered Arsenal from East Carolina, who's put up astronomical numbers so far during the course of the season. So a really big stretch, 3 games in 13 days coming up for the midshipmen after the bye week coming up this Saturday. Maryland also with the bye week after beating Central Florida in overtime, 30-24. Perry Hills gets hurt in the overtime. Tyrone Pegram, the freshman, comes in and he dazzles for 24 yards and gets them into the end zone, and they win it by a score of 30-24. DeMatha grad, the freshman, go Lorenzo, as we like to call him, Lorenzo Harrison, had a big game on the ground for Maryland. Really, for the first time in a while, Maryland's got depth at a key position at running back. They get Wes Brown back to add to that arsenal. But you got to like what the young players are doing. When you look at that freshman core with Pegram and now Lorenzo Harrison, they've got some skilled playmakers that really looks at their future now in a very, very bright way. This was not the bums from Central Florida that played last year that didn't win a game. It's a much different team. Not a great team, but a much better team with Scott Frost at the helm. So nice to see DJ Durkin's team get the victory on the road. They also have a bye week coming up this week. That'll do it for our show this week. As always, we appreciate you watching. You can watch not only on our TV channel, but you can watch online as well. Go to the Anne Arundel County Recreation and Parks page, and we've got a live link up there for you to be able to click and link on it, and you can watch it anytime that you want each week. As always, our thanks to you for watching. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Gridiron Review.